It's even turned on transcript. Lovely.
There we go.
You're all being recorded and transcribed.
Thanks very much, Phil. My name is Clive Watson, and I'll be your presenter for the next hour or so. What I planned to do was sort of probably talk for about an hour. You are welcome to ask questions on the chat window. You're welcome to interrupt if you have any any questions you'd like to ask. I plan to do a few slides just to get everyone on the same page, and then we'll go into the portal and do everything else live from that point onwards. If that fails, I'll have more slides, but hopefully that'll work absolutely fine. So my role is a black belt in Microsoft. I work in the security group. Sort of been in this particular group only about 4 months now, but it seems a bit longer than that. But I've been focused on the security tools for the last 3 years or so. Before that, I was a cloud solution architect, sort of focused on the early parts of Azure, and especially around things like workspaces and storing all the information logs, etc. So it was quite an easy step for me to move into the security space because that uses the same log store. But we'll talk about that as we go through. So slide 1 is the general overview. Because I'm only doing a few slides, I'm not going to put them into presenter mode at all. I'm just going to show them on the screen here. And I'll probably just drop my camera just so we'll cut some bandwidth down. And you will get the slides at the end of the call as well. So we position Azure Sentinel this way. It is both a SIEM or SIM, depends where you are and how that's pronounced. So it's a SIM and a security orchestration automated response SOAR tool. So it does both capabilities. It's there in the cloud, so it's part of the Azure Cloud solution to ingest information and aggregate that information. The one thing it's not is an aggregator of portals. And what I mean by that is you may already be using other technologies like Azure ATP or Azure Security Center. We're not replacing those portals, but we are aggregating the alerts from them. So you get an overview of all those alerts from all those tool sets. What you're also seeing from us as an organization is merging some of these tools together. So MTP is the new brand for all these tools here, and they all report their data or their alerts up into Sentinel. Soon there will be a bi-directional connector as well, so you'll be able to sync the information the other way as well. You'll also want to bring in other areas of information. So we will potentially, if you have Azure Security Center environment, ASC, you might wish to bring those pieces of information in. And again, we will send the alerts across that way as well. And probably more importantly for most people, you'll bring in third-party information. So that may be other clouds. It could be AWS or GCP. It could be machines on premises, in a cupboard, in a colo, wherever you happen to have them, providing we get an internet connection out to them. And I'll talk a bit more about the connectors in a short while. So essentially, we're a collection or an orchestration engine that brings the information in and enables you to query and visualize that information. And as all good SIMs should do, is react to that. So it provides a interface for the analysts to work, understand what incidents are arriving. He gives them good information about how to triage that, how to act on them, and with the SOAR component, provide an automated response. So I'll just do a quick sort of simple reference sort of architecture diagram, if you like, just to explain that in a little bit more detail before we go into the details. So it may be that you've got a virtual machine, a computer, or a service, whatever it happens to be. And the first thing you want to do from a security point of view, I don't know why my mouse keeps drawing a funny arrow, but you want to ingest the data. And we ingest the data into Log Analytics workspace. The Log Analytics has been around best part of 10 years now. So it's a very mature tool that we have in the Azure portal, very scalable and capable. When you've got the data in there, You can search on it and your teams can have a look at that information. They can create dashboards or workbooks. Again, I'll spend a bit more time explaining those. They can query the information at scale. You may already have a log analytics workspace in your environment. And again, we talk about some ways you might design this as well. So if you've already got a workspace, you're already halfway there. Essentially, when you have a workspace, when Sentinel comes along over the top here, you just tell it which workspace to use, and it will see all that information. For some organisations, they like to keep their SOC, their operations team and their security operations team separate. So if you wish to design it this sort of way, you can do. So you can put a boundary around maybe the team that's using Azure Security Center and MCAS. They can keep using those tools because, as I said before, we're not replacing those interfaces. They'll still be there. So that set of people, whoever they may be, perhaps over here, could still use those tools. But if there's any escalation required, the information will go up into the SOC analysts and the SOC manager. They will see that and they would decide how they need to respond to that, whether they need to respond to it or pass it down to someone else in a different piece of the business. Now this fits into the biggest eye chart we have, I think, which is the security reference architecture. So you might have seen where there's a reference architecture and one specifically for security. This is the security one. So I'm not going to go through all these components. You probably can't see all this, but essentially it's saying we are taking data feeds from other clouds. So that could be Salesforce or Google or Amazon. We're taking data from any other software as a service like Office 365. We're taking data from the hybrid cloud. So that's your on-premises machines or other devices. And then you're bringing information in perhaps from desktops and other areas of information. I see the comment there. You like that slide? If you wish to download it, there's an AKA link there, so you can download that. There's also a version of this that builds out as well, so you can so you get an understand of the breadth of the security tools that we have. The main reason for showing this is to briefly introduce the Graph Security API, and the fact that Sentinel gets a lot of its information from the Graph Security API, as well as a lot of these other tools, and also third parties as well. So we can send data out of this into other solutions, and that's often the case. But essentially, Sentinel and the SOC sits above all of this, taking feeds in from all these components. So it's all built in. All this data will flow in this way, this way, this way, drawing lots of random arrows. We can see, visualize that, query across that information, so you can really understand your posture across all those areas of information. One last slide, I think, for now, and that is a bit of a design slide again. I really said there is one of the key criteria here, and I will do it in the demo, is your workspaces. These workspaces, these log analytics workspaces, are a store of data, and typically you would have them in the area of Azure that's closest to you. So if you're based in the UK and you've got all your workload in the South region or West Europe or North Europe, you create your workspace in that region. If you're a multinational company, you may wish to create workspaces in different regions. So, this one's South America, you might create one there. You might have one in in West Europe, and you might have a number in the UK. It's up to you how many you have. We normally advise you to start one, then have a test one, and only add more by exception. So the idea is to keep your number of workspaces down to a fairly low number. That way you centralize everything. It's not a problem if you have more than one, but it just makes life a little bit easier for you to look after them and control them. The reasons you may need some multiples, though, will be things around compliance rules or in-country rules. So you might have part of the organization in Germany, and the data isn't allowed to leave Germany or Australia. There's certain regions in Australia the data can't move. So again, you create a workspace in that region. But Sentinel, as a SaaS service, will sit above all that anyway, so it can view and visualize multiple workspaces. So you can see that one at the same time you see that one, and you can see that one. as well. So done quite a few slides. Hope that makes sense so far. I haven't got any other questions on the chat, so I just checked that. So I was going to go into a live demo from this point onwards. So what I should do actually is go back home into the portal. Azure Sentinel is a SaaS service. So where, if you've worked with a SIM tool before, you would probably have to build out infrastructure. You know, there are one or two other cloud versions now, but most of them are on premises. So you need to build them out. Sentinel is part of the cloud, so I can type in Sentinel, find it in my Azure portal. I can click on it. When you've clicked on it, the first question is, which workspace do I want to use? So I've got 3 workspaces here. 2 are in the Microsoft Azure Active Directory, but I am able to reach across other Active Directories. So if I was to onboard another company, maybe, I can do that. Or if I'm a security partner who wants to look after multiple different customers, they can reach into the customer's workspaces with full RBAC controls, etc., to be able to see their information. I'm able to operate on a single workspace at a time or across more than one workspace if I wish to. Just before I show you that, I'll quickly show you adding a workspace. So just to answer the question in the chat, you normally put the workspace in an area of Azure, normally to keep an eye on the data to make sure it remains in that region. It could be a cost management thing. You might have multiple workspaces in the same country or the same region for cost control, because Department A pays for their data, and they may want to flow that into their own workspace. A case that sometimes occurs if you're working on a program and you need a workspace for perhaps a year, and then you're going to retire that workspace afterwards. Rather than putting that data in your main workspace, you might create a temporary workspace to store that information. The other thing is if you have data flowing across the Azure cloud so if you had information in Australia, and you would have egress information that would travel from Australia to West Europe if that was your central workspace. So you normally want to try and reduce the egress traffic. There is a small cost for that, but it is generally a very small cost, and most people are okay with that if that's what they want to do. But you've got full control about where you place your workspaces. You can build a new one. The really critical bits here, and I'm sure you've all done this before, you select a resource group to put it in. So again, that helps you with the region. You select your region that's closest to you or wherever you wish to place it. The most complicated thing is what do you want to call it? So that's not a valid name. The big thing about the name is you can't rename them afterwards. So if you're planning to do a test and you call it test something or other, and then you go into production, it's still going to be called test. So just think about how you're going to name the workspace. If you think you're going to throw it away at the end of the proof of concept of the test, you can put a temporary name in and then get the correct name for production use. Let's go back to the workspace blade. So I'm going to probably use a couple of workspaces tonight from various things, but let's just select with these 2. So you can see, as I said before, these are actually across 2 different Active Directories. So it's quite an interesting view. One's in West Europe and one's in the US. If I'm in that multiple view, I'm able to view certain key information across those workspaces. Now, what we don't do is show you everything. Okay, so really at the moment, we're looking at the incidents. This is more like if you're in the SOC, if you're a security analyst, if you're tier 1, tier 2, maybe you want to see the incoming incident report for that day or that hour, or you can go back depending on how much data you've got in your workspace. So that could be up to 2 years. So you can see the incoming incidents across multiple workspaces in a single view. We will add more controls in the near future. So there's some good plans in the next 3 to 6 months to add a lot more controls in there. But I'm just going to back out and go, let's go into Fabricam Prod. So this is my own workspace, or our team's workspace, should I say. So it's got a number of pieces of information in it. So my first pane is really to give me a bit of an overarching view of how much data is flowing in. So it's this central view here. How many alerts, which I already saw, incidents I saw before. If I've got any issues with data, so anything that's spiking above like a predefined boundary. And I've also got a world map, which tells me if I've got any bad incoming or outgoing data. Obviously incoming, is to be expected if you've got things open on the internet. Outgoing, you shouldn't ever see. So that's a good warning if you've got something bad going on. But before I get there, we'll just go through a couple of quick areas. One of them is news and guides. This will tell you about the new features that we've enabled, or any preview that's public. So when we release new features, which is fairly regularly, they would be displayed in this blade here. There is also a private preview option here. Now, that doesn't mean you're joining any of the private previews. I think we've got about 18 on the go at the moment. So that gives you oversight of where we're going, probably more in the next 3 to 6 months to a year's direction. You do need an NDA to access those previews. But if you sign up here, and only one person in the organization needs to sign up, you then get an email to tell you when new previews are arriving. It doesn't mean you have to join the preview. So it's a good thing to do. If you do have an NDA with Microsoft, you can click that. You can fill in a form, and you'll get an email notification of any upcoming previews. If you're interested in it, you can join that preview, and you can work with us on that that early part of the preview program. If you're not interested in that particular one, you can wait to the next one. You'll also see in this section a getting started guide, and essentially it's a 3-step process. Collect some data, create alerts against the data, respond to that if you wish to. And you can press the buttons here to do that, or actually these align to these buttons and controls here. So 1, 2, and 3. Just before I do that, because I've launched into Sentinel and the log analytics database or workspace sits underneath, there are some controls and connectors in there. So when I click on settings and settings again, and just because the third time's lucky, we'll do advanced settings now. So you may not have found that particularly easy, so hence me showing you. This is where you would onboard the log analytics agents. Now the log analytics agent is also used by Security Center and lots of our other tool sets. If you've got SCOM in your environment in the past, it's exactly the same agent. The OMS agent was its old name. It's had a number of name changes over the last few years, but it's essentially a single agent. There's a version for Windows and there's an open source version. You can download it and deploy it however you like. You know, if you wanted to deploy this with a PowerShell script or Bash or Chef or Puppet, it's up to you, or manually install it. It essentially asks you for the workspace you need to talk back to, and it gives you the long name, which you can just select there and copy and paste, and you need the primary key as a password. So you deploy the agent. I've got a number of machines reporting back, and they will start to send their data. But they only send the data when you've defined it. So if I don't want any Windows event logs from my Windows servers, I could untick all these. If I wanted to add a new one, like terminal services is popular at the moment, I could type in terminal and find a list of other event logs to add in. Or I could add in ones that don't exist. So if I type in Dell, we don't have any in my list, but I can type in Dell hardware. If that was a valid event log, I could hit plus, and then we would collect data from that. So if that's from 1 server or 1,000 servers, we would just reach out and go and grab that information. Just tidy that one up. And the same for syslog as well. So if I want to add a new facility in, like local something else, I can go and add that in. Or if I actually want to add syslog itself in, I can select it from the list, hit add. Or if I know there's a new facility name, I can type it in. It's also here that you bring any custom logs. So if you've got any flat files you want to bring in that aren't in standard log format, you can do that as well. So let's go back to Sentinel and also look at Sentinel's data connectors. This is the first step that most people do. You want to onboard a new connector. You'll see from this I've already onboarded some. So Azure Activity is green, so that's onboarded. It tells you how many are connected out of the 42 available to me. 42 plus the other ones I've just shown you. So the Windows one is separate because it's part of the log analytics story. Some of these we will use multiple times. So syslog is a great example of that. So if I scroll down to syslog, it actually does appear in here again, but I might use syslog to get to multiple different systems. Some of these are very specific connectors. So our threat intelligence preview for taxi is in there. And to get the threat intelligence feeds from elsewhere, like if you want to get the intelligence feeds from Palo Alto and MISP and others, MindMailed, they're all in there as well. One of the most popular ones is the Office 365 connector. And if I wanted to onboard that, and I can see I'm grayed out there and I'm not connected. So if I wanted to onboard that, I open the connector page. If you're really quick, I know it happened too fast. We do a check. So that was a live check, and it said to Clive, yeah, you passed that check, but I didn't pass this one. I don't have full global admin or sysadmin of Microsoft.com, which is probably just as well. But in your own environment, that means at that point you would go and find the right person who could go and add that connector in. And then you would tick the box to say, right, I want to bring in the Exchange logs, and I would put my credentials in towards the bottom, and we will make a connection. By the way, some of these connectors are push and some are pull. So what I mean by that is the Office one is a push connector. So we have to wait for Office to push that information. So it may not arrive immediately, and it might arrive in a cycle. Other connectors will be doing pulls, so they will be more predictable.
Clive,
Yes.
Daniel has asked the question as to, can you integrate, or how do you integrate an on-premise SIEM stroke SOC with Sentinel?
Brilliant. Actually, I will do a slide for that. You know, it's got that complicated. I need a slide. It's probably slightly easier to see with a diagram. So if we do this very quickly, you've got your raw data, you've got connectors. So I've really talked about this, moving the data up into log analytics, and then Sentinel sees that data. You might push that data to a common ITSM tool. So if you've got Snow or Jira or whatever, you can push that data there. If you've got a secondary SIEM, which may be on premise or maybe in the cloud or somewhere, you can have that running alongside. What you might decide to do is balance that data. So you've already got data flowing into there, and you might keep that flowing into there. You might move new data, like some of these connectors I've just shown you. So Office 365 is a classic. You often see people moving that to there because it's free. We don't charge you for that Office 365 connector, where you may be charged to move the same Office 365 data to your current on-premises SIEM. You might need to do some movement of data between these two as well. So that is also possible. So you can do that. So we are absolutely fine to work alongside a SIEM that you've got on premise. The reason I've got this balanced data in here, at some points you might want to decide where you point your data. So today you might send 100% of your data into your on-premise SIEM, and over time you start to migrate that. So in a month's time, you only send 80% of your information to your on-premise SIEM and the other 20 into us, and that might sort of change over time. And you might pick your connectors very carefully. Hopefully that answers the question. So let's briefly go back to the connectors. When you've connected, so I've jumped over into next steps. We have some workbooks. Those are the visualizations. We have some simple queries, but what's most important for security people is the alert templates that you can run. So it's basically telling me when I add that connector, there's at least 18 use cases or alerts or incidents I can create from that data source. Some of these are unique to that data source. These will only occur if you have the Office 365 connector. Some use other ones. So some I would have to have other data, or it will make use of multiple sources of information. The attack framework we map back to. So if you're familiar with their classifications on command and control, exfiltration, etc., we map back to those. And you're able to onboard these rules here by pressing a button. And this was actually step 2 on the onboarding. So you would come back, if you want to the analytics page, and you can do the same thing from here. I would go in. It's a little bit hard to see sometimes. There's 2 buttons here. I'm going to press rule templates. And these are about, I think at the moment, there's about 120 plus rule templates in the product you can choose from. So you'd only really enable the ones where you've got a connector. So if I took this one that's an Office 365, I can see there, I can do filtering. I can click on that, create a rule from it, and it's going to ask me some questions. So it may be that I wanted to give this a number. So you don't have to take our defaults. You can change any of these. You don't have to take the attack framework defaults. You can disagree. And maybe I think this is actually a medium. I can make changes. I can see the KQL scripting language that we use to query the database. So that's all there. Now, I'm not going to go into that tonight because we could spend an hour and a half on just the custom query language itself. But you can sort of see here, it's looking back at one day, and we're providing a list, a whitelist, or sorry, a allowed list and a deny list. This happens to be an allowed list of IP addresses that we want to work on. So we bring those lists in if you want to. So if I wanted to adjust this, I'll do a very simple adjustment. I would, extend that to 2 days. We've also got some pre-parsing in here. We can pull out information from the data, and we can do some visualization. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to move on from this. But if we wanted to reduce the amount of alerts, so if we only wanted to know if this alert has a count of greater than 10, that will give me some threshold management. Rule templates are replicas of the MITRE ATT&CK rules. They're based on the MITRE ATT&CK rules. They're based on the T numbers. And you can get them from, from other platforms, because a T number will tell you, what you need to protect against, and normally give you samples. If you bear with me a second, I'm just going to finish this little bit, and then I'll show you something around that. I might, when I have an alert fire, I might want to group them together. So this option is fairly new, and the default one is the one I prefer. It means that if an alert happens, we attach it to just one incident. And the idea here is that if you've got an alert, maybe from Phil, so he's done something and his IP address has generated it and his account's generated it, I will get a counter of the alert 1, incident 1. If Phil does the same thing, I don't want a brand new incident. I just want to increment my alert counter. So I'll still have the same incident, the same number my analyst is looking at, but there'll be a count of 2. And you do have abilities here to do some different filtering. So if you wanted to change it, if something like the IP address or the account name changed, you can do that as well. So it just really cuts down the noise you'd have in your incident management system. You can then attach an automation to it. So I might want to send an ITSM thing to ServiceNow, or we can use Jira or any of those other tools, anything you can get to an API to. So we've got some automations. These might be very specific, like go to ServiceNow or send an email, or it might be an actual resolving a playbook. So it might be a workflow that does multiple steps to go and solve something. So if you had an alert that fired because it was about someone signing on in a location they shouldn't have done, or it's suspicious, we might have a whole set of workflow in there that will go and resolves that end-to-end problem. Again, I'll come back to those. And then you create the alert. So you say, yes, when I pass the checks, I would say create, and I would build an alert out there. So the piece you asked about the attack framework and some of the other alerts, we're also able to bring in data from other platforms. So people like SOC Prime have got some good information here. Again, they are based off the MITRE ATT&CK framework. These are a great source of other alerts. Do you remember I said we had about 121 alert templates? Actually, in SOC Prime, they have 3,800 of them for us. What's interesting here, whilst we're in 3rd place, that's not a bad situation considering we released under a year ago an ArcSite, I think it's nearly 20 years old. So we're really catching up, and we're able to use a lot of alerts from other platforms. Even to the one of the big advantages with the SOC Prime tools, they provided a free tool, and actually that site there was free if you've got an enterprise email address. You can't use an outlook.com or a Gmail, but if you put in your work's email address, you can create an account. But if you come in here and you've got a rule in another language, so I'm using one from Sigma, and I can say translate that rule to Sentinel, and we'll do a live translate. So you might have some experience in QRadar or Splunk or some other tool set, and you'll be able to transfer forward and back if you need to help you move across. You can also filter their marketplace of all those rules. So they've recently moved us up into the top of the list. So if I wanted to find some Sentinel rules, and when I hit apply, and when I look at these are based on the T numbers. So you'd see the T number and the attack framework information on these, and the CVE number, and there's lots of other information on here. And when I drill into them, if I've clicked the right one, there's also a deploy to Azure button. Azure Sentinel, so I can actually just take these straight through into the portal if you've made the connectivity. And there is a blog article that explains how you do that. So there is a little bit of work to make that happen. So let's go back to my analytics and my rules. When I've got the rules in there, they will then turn into what we call an active rule, the rules I've already deployed. I'm also able to create new rules from scratch, which is called a scheduled rule. Just zoom in there. Or I'm able to create a Microsoft incident rule. Now, these are the ones I would bring in from the other Microsoft services. So we sort of talked earlier about Azure Security Center. If I wanted to bring Azure Security Center in, I can create a single rule called Azure Security Center and bring that in. I'd hit next. And I can also do an automated response, which is in preview. And I can bring all the alerts from Azure Security Center. So a single rule, bring them all in. I think they've got about 180 odd rules that would all come through. You are able to do some filtering in here as well if you need to. Oops, I didn't want to do that. So there's a lot with rules. Next question a lot of people ask is, how do I get more? So I've already showed you SOC Prime, which is obviously a third party. You can also go into the community section, and we have an open source community for Sentinel, very much like we have for Azure Security Center and some of the others now. So you can go to the community GitHub. Actually, I'll paste that in the chat window, so you know it's freely available. You can take from here, or you could even do pull requests. So if you've got something interesting you want to submit back to the community, you can push that back. So if you come up with a new detection or a new hunting query, you can have a look to see what we've got, and they're all done by folder. So if I had a new one for AWS CloudTrail, I can come in here to see, well, this one's been added last month or updated. I might go and have a look at it. There's all the metadata about it, plus the query at the bottom. And I might think, well, actually, I want to do this, but I want to do something slightly different. And you can see the T number actually from the MicroAttack framework in there as well, so you can go and read up on it. But you might want to change this, and you could put a pull request in to push that back into the GitHub. We make heavy use of the GitHub, and that really helps you to automate the deployment of both Azure Sentinel plus all the rules and the playbooks and the workbooks, etc., that can all come from GitHub. There are other GitHubs available as well, so we're also seeing a lot of partners. So if you go out to like Wartel, there's a number of partners out there provide other add-on solutions. So on the Wartel site, they have a Sentinel one for PowerShell automation, but there's also a KQL repository of hunting queries, and there's a few hundred in there. Again, so if you've heard of it, you can probably find an example out on the web or in GitHub. The other bit I was going to quickly show you was playbooks. A playbook is there as a workflow. So if you've used what was Office Flow, Power Automate as it is now, it's the same engine. I will show you. Let's do my email one. So it's a very basic one. I can do these in code, so I can work in JSON if I want to, and again I can put them into my pipelines for sort of code management and design and sending, or I can work in the GUI, which you might be familiar with if you've seen this before. Essentially, it's saying when I get an incoming alert from Azure Sentinel, I'm going to send an email. So something very, very basic, and I'm going to send it to me with some data from the alert, so things like description, etc. But I might want, I don't know, the number. Oops. Oh, I got the incident. So I don't know, take the alert information, the alert link. There's a number of data sources you can bring into here, by just typing in and seeing what's there in the data stream. So entities, things like the host name and IP address, etc. When you've got that in there, you might want to do something else with it, or you might want to do something in parallel. So maybe when I get that alert, I send an email. Maybe I need to go and raise an ITSM information in ServiceNow at the same time. So I'm going to create a record so I can do those two tasks in parallel. Maybe I want to send something to Teams. So again, I can go and create something or go and add, what was it, send? Post, isn't it? Post. There's control anyway to post a message. And then I can choose a Teams ID and Teams channel to go and post on. There's 250 enterprise connectors in here. So as I did Teams, I could also do a different technology. So definitely not one of ours, but I can post all of those. I can also do a lot of work in here for perhaps after I've done this step, I want to do some sort of other automation. So I might, after the email, I might want to create an OK and a cancel button to get an operative to decide if they want to go to the next step. So the example there might be that, let's just tidy this up a little bit because it's a bit messy, and get rid of that. And so maybe after I've done the email, my next step is to go and take an action. So I might want to go and talk via REST API to something, or I might want to give the operator a control that says press OK and cancel. And if they press OK, it does something. If they press cancel, it does something else. And then you might go and update the ITSM like snow information in a different way. So the question was, does Microsoft provide support for native connectors? ServiceNow, there's the ServiceNow connector. We are in redesign mode of this, so it's a single directional connector at the moment. So we push information to ServiceNow. It will be bi-directional. ServiceNow supports Sentinel bi-directionally using their REST API. So if you need slightly more advanced controls for ServiceNow, the way I would typically do it is use the REST API. So if you want to have, perhaps you want to read and write to ServiceNow, you would use the HTTP connector like that, and you would put in, maybe you want to do a get or a put or whatever it happens to be, and you put in the URL for their REST API, and you do the data transfer that way. So really, really powerful. Again, there's loads of these in the repository, the GitHub. So spent a lot of time on connectors. Then we'll get to the interesting bit. So remember those alerts we created earlier, those rules. They will fire in here as well as an incident. So you might have attached an automation to them. They might have already been resolved because maybe the automation sort of it did the first pass triage. So again, we can bypass the tier 1 analyst maybe for certain known things, because an analytics rule is a known thing you're protecting against. So maybe we've seen whatever that is. We've run the playbook, and the playbook has resolved it and closed the incident. If it has or hasn't, you can still come in here and see more information. Now I'm in my testing workspace, so I'm actually going to toggle to another one with a bit more real data. Also, the risk of having some real data is that it's very changeable, so we'll see where we go. Let's find a high priority alert. They tend to be a better payload. Oops. And learn to press buttons. So let's pick a high priority one. Now, and let's get to find some more data. There we go. Service host. Just choose one of these at random. I'm able to change its status. So I want to make myself active on it. Apply that, and I want to assign me to that incident or unassign. So if I've got the right credentials, I can change who's looking after this incident in the SOC. So I can do that, or I don't have to do that. I can, but I've chose to do that. I can also maybe share someone a link to this. So if I want someone else to help me work with this, I can click that button. I can paste that link to Phil or Paul, and then they can jump immediately to this exact same incident in the portal. Was that a question? Or was someone coming off mute? I think it was someone coming off mute. Okay, I'll carry on. I might look at the full details of this. Now, I haven't got one of these at the moment, but our machine learning algorithm looks at these, and this is just a standalone alert incident. The reason I haven't got one in the list, I just checked. If I had multiple alerts that machine learning had picked up on, you might get the alert information here. So it might say there's a low and the different alert name, and it may be from a different product and different set of data. So the machine learning will pick up when there is a match between the data. So maybe from Azure Security Center, we saw a specific IP address, and we saw that IP address in another set of data. We would map those two attacks together. Now, maybe this one's a high, but this one here would have been a low. Now, together, when we see those, we might decide to change the overall severity. So a good example of that would be two lows. Maybe there's two low alerts, And on their own, they are low, but when you see them together, we might say they're actually a high, because that's an indication of an attack or like a kill chain issue. So there's some interesting information there. I don't think I had one. You normally see them when you've got 2 in that list. Yeah, I didn't have one in this list. It's lots of the same ones. Most people, though, will just hit the investigate button here, and this is using that. This is using our security graph to map this data out. Big time saver for the analyst. You can go and choose something like a PC, click on it, see more detail and context of it, where it's come from. Maybe better just look at a timeline view though and see. Actually, I should click on this here. See this pollings, the 3 dots. We're checking what other data is available. So I've already grayed out loads of data sources that don't have anything, but I've got 122 related alerts. So this is going to get busy. So that's drawn out all this mass. Now I could go and check the high priority ones, the red ones, and I can drag them and I can click them and I can go and look at their information. But actually what most people do is hit the timeline view and see what happened in the order it happened. So this is good for understanding dwell, and dwell is when someone gets on the network and starts doing things, then does it very slowly over time. So 19th of the 5th, the first one, 18th the 6th, nearly a month later. Then they got a bit more busy as they're doing things a little bit more, a little faster. And eventually you can sort of see, you know, exactly what's happened here, what tools they're deploying, lots of information. The important thing here, I didn't write a single line of code. I didn't come out of the portal. I didn't see, you know, I didn't have to use anything else. So as an analyst, I can just quickly come in here, select an item, see the information, and off I go. The other thing I'm able to do here is, sorry, it's a very busy screen. Let's just zoom out a bit. Is when I select the base level. Oops, come on. There you go. I've also got this playbook button back there as well, because maybe at this point I now want to do an automation. I want to do that workflow. That may be just that send email, and it will do whatever send email does. It may be escalate to SOC, or it may be when I've understood the attack, I've got a specific playbook that resolves that particular attack, so I can then just choose that from a list. Recommendations on false positives. Yes, so let's just go back a page. In this list here, when you close, you're marking this alert maybe as false positive. So when you've investigated it, you mark it as false positive or inaccurate data or a true positive. So currently we do that. We'll enable a control where you can put in your own wording in here. So you might have some other cases that you want to mark. One of the other things you'll see probably within about 3 months is some better information here. So we'll actually show you the name of the account names here rather than just account. When the false positive rate and all those controls I have there will be displayed in this pane. So, and they'll be displayed as a percentage. So if you got an FP rate of 80%, so 80% of the time it got closed as false positive, it will show 80% false positive and 20% okay, or whatever the other value is. So that will all be on this screen. So you'll know when you start investigating the incident if it's a good incident in the past or a bad one. So you perhaps approach it in a different way. The flip side of incidents is hunting. These are the unknowns. This is also a brilliant place to start when you set Sentinel up the first time. There's no rules defined at the beginning, so there's no rules are on. So we're not alerting on any of the data. So after you've added your data connectors in, or 1 or 2, whatever it happens to be, when you've added your connectors in, I would normally immediately go to hunting. So that means I can run all my queries against all the data, and there's almost 100 hunting queries, and there's more in the GitHub as well. So again, you can add additional ones into here by just doing new query and adding one in. You can also favorite them. So maybe I'm an analyst, I'm looking at all this stuff on, so these are all very similar. So that's a storage one, isn't on that topic. So I've starred these ones. Every time I come in here, they've auto run and checked. So as an analyst, I don't have to go and run these again. They all come in. Every time I come to this blade in the portal, they run. But I could also just say run all. You know, if you saw they refreshed and it's refreshing more. So this rare audit activity pulled up at 50, and I can filter these results by the highest number. You know, sort of bad security and good security, you know, you need to understand the numbers. You know, you might get a very high number, but it's not a bad thing. You might get a very low number and it's a really bad attack. So you need to understand a bit about it. We do have the MITRE attack tactics again displayed, so you can see some more information. You can see the query and you're able to drill into the actual result of it. So I can see the actual syntax. Let's move that out of the way a little bit so I can work on it. I can see the individual line items, so I can see it's Richard at this IP address. I can also open this up and see more details. So he's added a member to a group. So it's an admin function, but I'm probably okay with that. But maybe I want to see this, I only want to see that particular operation name or do some other filtering. So I can use the ellipses to say, actually, I only want to see this. And it will add it to the end of the syntax for me. So I haven't had to write a line of code, it's just added it in. And if I rerun the query, I would get an operation name filter in my list somewhere. Be in there somewhere. So I'm able to do some filtering or some summarizing and do some work there. The other cool thing with this, if you do some filtering and maybe you know, you wanted to just perhaps include the IP address, that was a sort of slightly better thing to say, let's exclude that IP address, and when I rerun it, I shouldn't see that one. So I've got no results. So there's a way of filtering out. I could now promote this to be a Sentinel alert. So I can take this from here and take that right back to create an alert from it. So if I've defended in some way, I want to look at this data, I want to create an alert the next time it happens, I can do that. I can also export it. So, oops, I need data to export. Let's get rid of that, rerun it. Press the right button, come on. I can export the data to Power BI or a CSV file, or you can even provide a link to this data as well for other people to have a look at it, or pin it to a dashboard. I'm also able to bookmark it. So maybe I'm investigating this as an analyst. I can tick one of these, add to bookmark. We'll parse out relevant information. We might miss something. So if there is an URL in there, we might, you know, you might be able to go and see it in the columns. No, there isn't. But I could pick another one. I could put some tagging in, so I can put it's a very small text box at the moment. We're gonna make it bigger, and I can put some notes in. It was Paul. Whoops, I learned to spell. And number one. Whoops. I might put some notes in there while I'm investigating this, because I might be looking at it and saying, right, okay, I've seen Paul do this. When I hit create, it will save it back into the Log Analytics workspace for me. I won't do that one. Let's just use one that's hopefully there earlier. There is a table called hunting bookmarks. And if I ask it for 10 random lines, we've got ones that have happened before. So as part of my hunt, I can look in here and say, actually, have I got any with Paul in? Which hopefully we haven't, because Paul's hopefully a good boy. No, we haven't. So you know, I haven't got any more information. So that can be useful to understand. You know, perhaps in that note before you said you have to you told his manager to go and resolve the problem, rather than sort of actually putting a more formal fix in place. I've got a bit of chat about audio. Is that everyone able to see? It's being recorded, so yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. I think Danielle has had some problems. She's probably going to drop rejoin. I think you've got about 9 minutes or so, Clive, just as a time check. Thank
you. So we've covered incidents and hunting. The other one of the best features, I think, is live stream. This enables you to look for things in the future. So rather than all the stuff we've done so far with creating an alert or doing a hunt is looking backwards at the data, this looks forward. So this particular query, again, the same language, is looking for people failing to log on. So maybe I want to investigate, you know, who's signing on or when they're failing to log on, or some other scenario that's looking forward. I can build my query, I can hit play, and that's just going to run now until I get a positive result. So every 60 seconds, it's, oops, completely misdrew that. It's going to poll and see if you've got any information. If you have, the results counter goes up, and you will get a notification in the Azure portal. So if I've gone to lunch or gone away from the portal for a number of hours, I come back and then I see my counter incremented. So I know that particular thing I'm trying to investigate has happened, and then I can go and have a look for that. So I can then go backwards in the data to understand it. So the live stream is extremely important. Bookmarks are also shown here, and you're able to also investigate the bookmarks in the same ways we saw with the incident investigation. You can see the bookmark and the items that are related to that bookmark, and then you can sort of filter into them and see all that. Books. These are I'm not going to go into demonstration this, and actually we're about to change this. We've already announced that this feature is going to change a little bit. This is probably slightly from the more experienced in the SOC. A lot of this comes from our own SOC and our Dart team, which is the defence and response team. You only want to see a member of the Dart team you'll only see a member of the Dart team when you've really got a serious security problem and they land on site with you. But they do some good feedback. Our other teams also do some good feedback, and they often use a notebook to do that. Essentially, there is a AKS container that spins up. We'll run an open source notebook against it that has a collection of scripting. It's generally either F#, R, or Python, and it could be a combination. So it's like it looks like a bit like a Word document. So I'm just trying to find one that's slightly more readable at that resolution. Oh well, in the interest of time, I won't bother. But essentially, it's reading a lot across our data, but every line of that sort of table of contents, like you get in Word, every item in that table of contents will be a piece of R or Python behind it. So it's going to go off, grab a load of data from our data sources, but if you're using Python or R, it could be getting it from a data lake, or it could be getting it from other systems that you have. It will run all that data on a free container, gather the evidence, dump it to an Excel file, and then give you, a graph or a grid or some sort of view of that information, all very consistently. So setting these up is a little bit complicated, and we're going to make that easier. Actually, to run these is pretty straightforward. So you can give this to a tier 1 analyst. When they click guided investigation, it will run, gather all the information in a very consistent way, in a very simple way. The other visualization is workbooks, my personal favorite. So these workbooks are generally supplied by the connectors. So there's a workbook for Office, or there's 3 workbooks for Office. There are workbooks for things like Azure Activity, audit logs, and there's also one from the community. So that's come from the GitHub. Now what that actually is the community said that we like those 2 and we like that workbook, but we want to put it all together in a single workbook. And you're absolutely able to do that. So somebody in the community did that work, published it back to the GitHub, and now anybody can make use of it. So they put all that together in a single workbook, so you can visualize the information on a single pane. So if you want that single pane approach and you want to bring some data together, you can do that. You have full ability to edit these workbooks, whether that's just to share them with someone via a link, or you want to edit and customize every piece of this. So change the name, change the filters, change the defaults, put your company logo in there or your own name. That's absolutely possible. The other thing, because we keep using the same query language and the same data, you can come in here and maybe you like this view, but you want to turn that into an alert. So I could copy that from there. So I can Control-C it, and I can copy that into an alert and build an alert from it if I needed to, so we can use that exact same query. So that's also another good source of hundreds, if not thousands, of queries. So workbook's incredibly powerful. And that's covered off pretty much the majority of all the pieces in the system. It's very extensible with things like workbooks, playbooks, and the notebooks. The community is very powerful and growing all the time. We're classifying a lot of the community areas at the moment, so you can see the contributions from Microsoft or partners or the community. There's a question on threat intelligence. So not showing currently in the portal. If you're on the private previews, you will see threat intelligence there, but you will see the threat intelligence connectors down here. So I think I briefly touched on them earlier. So we've got a preview for Taxi and Sticks, and there's another threat intelligence connector that brings in lots of other sources from MindMeld and MISP and Palo Alto, etc. And we also got our own threat intelligence feed from the Azure Security Graph, from the Security Graph API as well, which I showed at the beginning of the call. So it can bring in a lot of information there.
There was a previous question, Clive, about to do with ServiceNow again. So Schwabe was asking if an incident's raised and sent to ServiceNow. I think the English is a bit broken here, Schwabe. And the group incident will also be able to update the same incident in ServiceNow. And then if the incident's closed in ServiceNow, will it also be cleared in Sentinel?
So do you remember when I showed the ServiceNow connector? It's a single directional connector at the moment. So if you close it in ServiceNow, it won't automatically close in Sentinel. But I showed you that HTTP connector. So you can talk from ServiceNow back to our HTTP REST API, and then you can close it that way. So you would have to create a playbook to do that. The ServiceNow team and our team are working together, and that's in design review at the moment. So we're hoping to have a preview of that fairly shortly. So we'll have a connector that is bi-directional, so we'll be able to do that. ServiceNow at their last conference announced it. So the APIs are there. We just need to put an interface in place just to make that happen without you having to call APIs. And I think that's pretty much it. I've allowed a little bit of time for any other sort of questions if anyone wants to come off mute, if that's all right, Phil, or am I bang at the time?
No, you're near enough bang on. So any more questions for Clive before we have a quick break?
Oh, the other thing.
Yeah, sure.
Oops. If you need to know more about connectors, we publish what we call the grand list. So I talked about our agent, but you can use other agents. So you can use the one from ALK, which is Logstash. So we can use the Logstash agent. And we also publish a list of vendors we connect to and the method we use. So do you remember when I looked at connectors, I had 44 connectors, which in some cases doesn't sound a lot, but a lot of these products use the same method. So lots of them use Ceph or syslog or APIs. So rather than having a custom connector for all of them, we have a generic connector and you just connect to these products. So the grand list is a good list of the additional connectors. I'll paste that into the chat window for anyone who's interested. And the other thing, if you want to become a ninja, we have full training on Sentinel. So what I've just done in an hour is like a 2-day online course, but it's done in chunks of about an hour. So all the topics I covered, very high level, like design, there's an hour or so on design, the custom query language, I think it's about an hour and a half, operations, and you've got all the recordings and the presentations. And this is done by our engineering that writes the product. They also publish an RSS feed. So if something changes, they will normally on a monthly 6 weeks basis will go and update that that part of the module. This is freely available online. So I'll put the link in here in the chat window, and it'll be on my slide deck anyway. But if you do the full 2 days or the sections you're happy with, you can always refer back in a month or so and may find that 1 or 2 sections have been updated, and then you can just update yourself on those ones. One other quick question to Sergey about best practice for log management. Really good question. Some more stuff coming into the portal soon. Those who follow me on LinkedIn or other platforms would have probably seen this workbook. So it's available from my to download from my repository on and it's linked about in the Sentinel blogs, the Azure Sentinel blog, official blog. I had an article there. This is a very good way of showing the data from the workspace. So for instance, I'm bringing in security event data from Azure Security Center, and over the last 30 days, my average ingestion is that many records. The table size is almost 20 gig. So I get to see how much data is flowing in and from the other tables. Are they chargeable tables? You remember I said Office 365 is a free table, so that we've marked as false somewhere down this list. Office activity is free, so that's marked as false. So I've got lots of good information there about where to bring the information on and the latency when I last got the records. There's also a handy pricing bit, so that could be £4 or €4 or $4. If you know your rough cost pay-as-you-go cost, you can put a number in there, and then if you scroll to the right, you can see the cost per table. So roughly, my security logs are costing me that per last 30 days, I think I said. Yeah, last 30 days. So it just gives you a very basic cost analysis. I will say basic. It doesn't replace the pricing calculator, and it doesn't take into account of capacity reservations, which apply when you get to 100 gig a day, 200 gig a day, etc. But it does give you numbers like the 1.34 gig average a day I'm ingesting, because that is the actual number you'd put into the Azure pricing calculator. I suspect your number will be higher than that, but if you put in 50 gig into the Azure pricing calculator, that's the value you want. You paste that into the pricing calculator and you get your answer. If you want the GitHub, I will paste the link in a few seconds. Any other questions?
I think we'll close it off there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Clive. As always, thorough and very detailed. You are Mr. Sentinel.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome. Right, I'll close the recording off. If we can have 11 minutes and be back for 10 to, we'll then have Paul and Matt take us through enterprise scale, the new addition to the CAF recently, for about 45 minutes. Thanks, everyone. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, Clive.